Elijah and the prophets of Baal. When Ahab became king of Israel, he did more evil than all the kings before him. King Ahab not only turned away from God to worship Baal, but encouraged the whole nation to do the same. People who refused to worship Baal were persecuted or driven out of the country. Every prophet of God who could be found was put to death. Suddenly, one day, the king heard a voice burst out like a thunderclap, and a stranger stood before him. "As the Lord God of Israel lives, there will not be dew or rain until I say so." Elijah the prophet had arrived with a message from the Lord God. People stood in stunned silence as Elijah turned and left. A prophet of God had not been heard for a long time, but they paid little attention to Elijah or God's warning. For 3 years no rain fell in the land of Israel. The grass disappeared from the hills. The cattle grew lean. Nothing grew in the field, and people had less and less to eat. In every home people were suffering from hunger. Unless rain fell soon, there would be no food at all. They began thinking about Elijah's warning. When the king saw the land turning to desert and his animals dying of hunger, he sent messengers to find Elijah. The messengers searched every city and country. They all returned with the same response: Elijah is nowhere to be found. The messengers began to fear for their lives as the king became furious at their failure to find the prophet. God then spoke to Elijah, "Go and show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the earth." Elijah set off and saw Obadiah the king's servant. The prophet said, "Go and tell Ahab that Elijah has returned." Obadiah hurried back to the king. King Ahab listened to Obadiah's report and set off to find Elijah. Elijah was not afraid and waited calmly for the king to arrive. The king cried angrily, "Are you the one who has been making trouble for Israel?" Elijah answered, "I am not the one making trouble for Israel. You are. You have disobeyed the commandments of the Lord. You have worshipped the false god Baal." Ahab could not answer the prophet of God. The king listened as Elijah told him to gather all the people of Israel and all the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. Ahab agreed. From every corner of the kingdom people came to Mount Carmel wondering what was going to happen. Elijah wanted to let the people see that the Lord God had overwhelming power. "How long will you waver between two gods?" Elijah asked. "If the Lord is your God, follow him. If Baal is your God, then follow him." The people listened but did not reply. Elijah proclaimed, "I am a lone prophet of the Lord, but Baal has 450 prophets. Let them prepare a sacrifice, and I will do the same. We will not light the fire. They will call on Baal, and I will call on the Lord, and the one who answers with fire, let him be God." The people agreed to the contest. Elijah stood by as the prophets of Baal prepared their sacrifice and called on their God from morning until noon. The prophets leaped and danced. "O Baal, hear us." But there was no answer from Baal. At noon Elijah mocked the prophets. "Cry louder. Maybe Baal is busy or away on a journey. Maybe he's asleep and needs to be woken." The prophets of Baal cried louder than ever, leaping around in a wild frenzy begging their God to answer. They even cut themselves with knives that Baal might take pity on them. The people watched, but Baal did not answer. Elijah then called the people closer to him as he prepared his sacrifice. First Elijah took 12 stones and rebuilt a broken altar of the Lord. He put the wood in place and laid the sacrifice on the altar. Next he made a trench all around the altar of the Lord and made a strange request. He told the people to fill 12 large jars with water and throw it all over the sacrifice until it was soaked and the trench was filled to the brim. The people watched as Elijah came to the altar. "Lord God of Israel, let it be known today that you are God and I am your servant who has done all these things at your command. Hear me, O Lord, so that these people will know you are the Lord God and turn back to you." Suddenly the fire of the Lord fell. The altar, the sacrifice, the water, even the dust of the ground was consumed by the fire. The people fell on their faces and exclaimed, "The Lord, He is God." The whole nation worshipped the Lord as the only living God. Only then did Elijah begin to think about rain. He went up to the top of Mount Carmel and fell on the ground to pray. Then he told his servant to go and look out to sea for a rain cloud. The servant reported there was nothing. Elijah kept praying and sent the servant 7 times to look for rain. The 7th time the servant reported, "There is a small cloud the size of a man's hand rising out of the sea." Elijah sent his servant to King Ahab to tell him the rain was coming. The people had repented and turned back to God, and the Lord blessed them with rain and food once more. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Share and leave a comment. Subscribe.